So this is a talk about how I keep my apiary sustainable and I don't have to buy bees from outside my apiary. And this is something that I've been developing over a number of years, and so I'd like to present it to you. So I'd like to ask you a question. What does success in the apiary mean to you? So does it mean that you're going to make your living from your bees? Probably not. Most of us here are backyard beekeepers who are just trying to have fun with our bees and learn about bees because they're such a fascinating little bug. And but maybe all you really care about is that your bees are alive in the spring. That may be true. And I said this one time at a meeting, and the whole audience erupted in cheers and claps. And so I think that's what it is. I think most people would just like to have their bees be alive in the spring. Well, you know, to me, of course, it's about, I'm running a commercial operation with, including all the nucleus colonies and all the production colonies. I have somewhere around 1,500 colonies. And so I need to be profitable. I have a mortgage, and I need to pay the bank. And so I need to make a profit with my apiary. But I also would like to be sustainable over time. And so this plan that I have has allowed me for a number of years, for more than 10 years. I haven't bought bees since the 90s. So I am able to grow all my own bees from all my own bees. So we'll start at the history of my apiary, which is called French Hill Apiaries, because I live in a region of my town called French Hill, where the French were sort of, the French from Quebec were sort of pushed out of the good farmland into the stony farmland. And so all the folks up on the stony farmland were the French, and they call it French Hill. I started keeping bees in 1974. I bought 2 packages of Italian bees from the state of Georgia for $10.50 a package. So things have changed considerably since then. It took me a number of years just to learn how to winter my bees, because we have a winter. I mean, folks tell me about wintering bees in England, and bees bringing pollen in on Boxing Day and February, and queens emerging in March. And well, we had our first cleansing flight on April 1st this year, since December, and our first pollen never came in until April 15th. So we truly do have a winter with temperatures of -20 F, -25 F, sometimes not above 0 in the F in the daytime. And that for us is really the critical thing that's difficult about wintering bees where I am. It's that long period without a cleansing flight. But I do look at winter as my friend, because winter is the great selector of good stock. And if the colony can make it through the winter, then you know you have good bees. So from 1974 to 1981, I had possibly 50 colonies at max. Around 1980, I'd like to increase my apiary. I got a government loan, and I built up to a couple hundred hives. And then I got a job managing an apiary for an apple orchard, where we had about 500 additional colonies. And it was more or less on-the-job training, because I went from 50 colonies to 500 colonies overnight. And so I had a lot of learning to do. And so that was really my first introduction to commercial beekeeping and apple pollination. And I eventually got up to around 1,000 colonies, 1,000 production colonies. But I was pollinating apples, $22 a colony for pollination. And I would often have a large winter loss after the orchard. I didn't really understand why that was. Why would a colony move to the apple orchard in May, not recover by fall, by autumn? Possibly the fungicides that were being sprayed, but I didn't know that. I don't think we knew that at the time, but now we're finding out things about fungicides in apple pollen that really doesn't help the colony at all. So that may have been the problem, why I would have a 30% loss with pollinators and a 10% loss with non-pollinators. So some years, in order to keep my numbers up, to fulfill my contract of 600 colonies, we move 600 colonies into the apple orchard by hand every year, which means 3 trucks and 9 guys and 3 nights in and 3 nights out, all by hand. Well, if I had a bad winter loss, I'd have to buy bees, because usually when you have a bad winter loss, you also have weak colonies. The living colonies are weak in the spring. Unable to split those colonies, I'd have to purchase single broods from the southern states. We used to buy single brood chamber colonies for $55. Prices have changed. So in about 1998, I heard of a little plan to overwinter nucleus colonies. Seemed like a good idea to me. First couple years, I overwintered nucleus colonies, and it was immediately obvious the wisdom of that overwintering of nucleus colonies. So I began overwintering nucleus colonies seriously in about 2000, raising my own queens, and my apiary never looked back. I had such good success that I was able to quit apple pollination. As soon as I quit apple pollination, my per colony average of honey production went from, my total honey production went from 20 tons to 50 tons. That's what happens when you move your bees into the apple orchards in the Northeast. And as I went along, I got more and more proficient at it. Pretty soon I had more bees than I knew what to do with. And comes along CCD, and everybody's losing their bees. And we're scratching our heads saying, what are they talking about? We have more bees than we know what to do with. We have so many bees that it almost becomes a joke. The CCD thing becomes a joke. So I think this is the answer to maintaining our apiaries over time. So over the years, my bees have died the same as you, same as your bees. Every year I lost colonies from starvation. Yes. When I first started losing bees, I lost lots of bees from starvation. Probably my largest loss. Or how about dysentery? This is a 3 brood box colony. This is the kind of snow we get. So you can see what happens when they don't have a cleansing flight from December until April. This is what some of them look like. Or how about nosema? We have losses from nosema. Or how about acarine? I don't know if you still have losses from acarine, but this is what it looks like. The bees boiling out of a hive when the rest of the apiary is quiet, dying in the snow. Nothing left in the spring but a pile of dead bees on the ground. I had these tested by my old friend in Maine, the state apiculturist. 95% infestation of these bees. Dead. Or how about this little blood-sucking vampire? You know you're losing bees from this, and I'm losing bees from this, and everybody's losing bees from this. And well, how about this one? Do you have this one here? You don't have black bears? You don't know how lucky you are. This was this April. 2 weeks before we examined this yard, perfectly fine. Nice strong yard. 2 weeks later, nothing left. It's a crying shame. It broke my heart to see this. But this is what we have to deal with. And this, a dead hive from a bear or from nosema or from varroa is still dead. So we have to recover from things like this. So does this sound familiar? Are you losing, except for the black bears, you're losing bees for all the same reasons. So you have to decide, how will you replace your honeybees? You can catch swarms. Well, when I was a young beekeeper, I put my name in at the fire department and the police station, and I'd get calls all the time for swarms. You know, a swarm would come out of a tree and land in a neighborhood, and nobody would come out of their house because there was a swarm of bees hanging in the trees, and the police would call me, and I'd go rescue the neighborhood by retrieving the bees. There are no swarms anymore. I haven't had a swarm call in years, because the varroa mites and whatever has killed all the wild swarms off. The only wild swarms we have anymore are swarms coming off people's colonies, reestablishing in a cavity, and dying the next year. So you could split your colonies. Yes, you could split your colonies, but what's the cost of splitting your colonies? Is it not loss of crop? Loss of some percentage of your crop? If you split your colony and then you have bad weather afterwards, do either of them build up? Do either of them make a crop? No. Or suppose you split your colony and by the time it gets built back up again, you have a drought. You've missed the honey flow with that colony. So we need to keep our colonies as strong as possible all the time. You could buy nucleus colonies. I see the price of nucleus colonies over here, and I'm just shocked. 195 pounds for a nucleus colony or more? I'm amazed. I think I'm going to buy a boat. I think I'm going to load my nucleus colonies on a boat and bring them over here because we're only getting $130 for our overwintered nucleus colonies. So yes, you can buy nukes. You can split colonies. You can try to catch swarms, but is that really going to do the job? What about package bees? Now, package bees in the US are the way to start your colony. This started in 1879 with A.I. Root. A.I. Root knew that he could buy cheap queens from the south and make new colonies early spring, but he couldn't get his bees built up to shake bees out of overwintered colonies early enough. So he put out a call. He said he would pay $1 a pound for any bees shipped to him alive. And several people came up with a plan, and people discovered how to ship bees. In the first year, the price doubled because it was so popular. And from then on, the package bee industry was born. And the U.S. beekeepers have been totally spoiled by the packaged bee industry. They produced a good product for a fair price in a timely fashion. If you'd like your bees the first week of May, you got your bees the first week of May. Well, now with all the new beekeepers, ever since CCD, we've had a huge increase of beekeepers in the U.S. So much so that the packaged bee industry can't produce all the packages required. So they're trying to produce hundreds of thousands of packages, hundreds of thousands of queens to go in those packages, too early in the season, at a time where if you have any problems with the weather, you get poor mating. And so these packages are being shipped to beekeepers and dying immediately. Being shipped to beekeepers with drone-laying queens. The beekeeper calls the package producer, says, I have a drone-laying queen, and the package producer says, yeah, so? As if it's the beekeeper's fault. Everything is blamed on the beekeeper. There is no repayment by the package producer. And the packaged bee industry, in my opinion now, is crashing. And they're going to lose it if they don't come around and figure out what's going on. But in the meantime, the beekeepers are left holding the bag. What are we supposed to do? How can we get bees in our dead hives if what we buy, 3/4 of what we buy, is dead within a year? I started in 1974. My first packages of bees cost $10.50 delivered. At the time, bulk honey, I'm talking about barrel price of honey, was 50 cents a pound. With those numbers, it takes 20 pounds of honey, 21 pounds of honey to pay for your package of bees. It's pretty easy at that time to make 21 pounds of honey from a package of bees. In 1 year, the price doubled to $20, and the price of honey stayed the same. So now it's almost 40 pounds of honey to pay for your package. And you can see what's happened over the years. The price of packages, as beekeeping becomes more popular, have become more and more expensive. Yes, the price of honey has finally gone up. But in 2013, the average price for a package of bees was $100. The average price for bulk honey was $2. So it still now takes us 50 pounds of honey to pay for a package of bees. But as I said, if 80% of them are dying within the first year, think if you only lost half of them. So if you bought 2 packages of bees for $100 apiece, now you have to make 100 pounds of honey with one of those packages to pay for the 2 packages. That's just about impossible. So when I first started this going out and talking and trying to get people to understand about overwintering nucleus colonies, I always talked about southern bees and northern bees, and I got in just boatloads of trouble. because we still have this issue in the States between the North and the South. Honestly, we do. It's silent, but it's still there. And so if I was to tell people that don't buy southern bees, oh my goodness, I get in big trouble. So I have to really, what is the problem? Why do packages fail? And all of the above, all of these reasons. Certainly with all the new beekeepers who haven't a clue how to handle bees, and what to look for, and how to recognize an issue. Beekeeper error has to be number 1. I agree with the package producer, but when you get a package with a drone layer in it, that's not the beekeeper's error. We have poor forage. Some of my apiaries, which used to be white clover in hayfields, brambles in hedgerows, pastures, white clover coming in after the alfalfa went by, that's all gone now. The price of maize, corn is something different to you, yes? The price of maize went to $8.50 a bushel from $2.50 a bushel. Now all the farmers want to grow corn. Our agriculture is basically dairy in my state. Dairy is getting very difficult to be profitable. And so as the small family farms go out of business, the industrial farms are taking over. The family farm owes so much money to the agricultural services company that when they lose the farm, who do you think gets the farm? The agricultural services company. What do? First thing they do is they take out the hedgerows and the pastures and tell the beekeeper to get the heck off the farm because they want every field to be square. They don't want any apiaries in the corner of a field because they have to pick up this monster machine that's as wide as this room. So there is no forage in maize. There is no forage in alfalfa that's cut 4 times. There is no forage in soybeans. And the Champlain Valley, where I keep bees, is turning into a floral desert. There's nothing there for them to work on. Some of my apiaries that were traditionally my best apiaries for production are now my worst apiaries for production because there's nothing surrounding them but maize and alfalfa that gets cut 4 times and soybeans that yield no honey. But also poor queens and also sick bees. I don't know why they're sick. Is it nosema? Is it fipronil being fed to the bees to control the small hive beetles? I'm not sure. I almost think it's all of the above. So we're at a crossroads right now. So packaged bees are not sustainable. Bringing in packaged bees is not sustainable. Are there packaged bees for sale here? I believe so. Are they coming in from Italy and Greece and everywhere else? Yes. Is that wise? I don't think so. I think you should be producing your own bees from your own locality with your local queens. There's plenty of queen breeders here. I read on the internet that most people here are advised that nucleus colonies should be left to the professionals. Yes, I agree. Producing nucleus colonies should be left to the professionals. And who are the professionals? The honeybees are the professionals. The honeybees do all the work. Making nucleus colonies isn't difficult. So if packages aren't sustainable, well, neither are buying nucleus colonies. Neither are catching swarms. Neither is splitting your bees. None of this is sustainable over time. So I'm saying that in a non-migratory operation in North America, none of the above are sustainable over time. So what is a beekeeper supposed to do? You have to have a plan. And this talk is about my plan. I consider that the nucleus colony is the foundation of sustainable beekeeping. This is a picture of 2 nucleus colonies that have overwintered just after snowmelt. Look at that. Those are beautiful. I didn't do anything except put a little brood and bees in a hive in midsummer and let them build up and manage them so they wouldn't swarm. And this is what comes out of it. I didn't do anything. The bees did everything. I gave them a box. I got them started. I gave them a queen, and they did the rest. It's really not difficult. These nucleus colonies, this is a picture of a nucleus colony in actually a box with 2 nucleus colonies, 2-story nucleus colonies. So these, each one would have 4 combs over 4 combs. So there's 8 combs total, vertically, not horizontally. Right off the bat, they can be used to replace your winter losses. But what about that weak colony in the apiary? Yes, they can be used to requeen and boost that weak colony in the apiary. You take a colony in the apiary in early spring that's only got a couple frames of brood, and you have this nucleus colony that's got 6 frames of brood, and you kill the old queen and you unite the 2, and now what have you got? You've got a nucleus, you've got a production colony with a young queen and 8 frames of brood immediately. You can make increase. You can produce income. If you had, suppose you had 50 nucleus colonies and you sold them for 195 pounds apiece. My goodness. It's almost time to quit the day job. Or how about making brood factories? We'll talk about brood factories. But managing these nucleus colonies for brood factories gives you extra brood and bees for doing your bee work, for boosting colonies, for making cell builders, or as a source for making more nucleus colonies. So it becomes an ongoing process, and it supports itself. So a quick history of wintering nucleus colonies. Now, this idea was taught to me by Kirk Webster in the US. He tried for years to get me to winter nucleus colonies, and I finally agreed to listen. And gosh, I wish I had 20 years before I had started this. Then I read Brother Adams' book, Beekeeping at Buckfast Abbey, and it was pretty obvious that Kirk's plan was really just a takeoff, a little twist on Brother Adams' plan. Brother Adam doesn't really talk about the wisdom of wintering nucleus colonies. He talks about the wisdom of wintering queen bees. But is a nucleus colony is nothing more than a queen bee with support staff? So they tell us we can't have early queens in the north. We have to buy our queens from Texas and Florida and Alabama. Well, if you overwinter your nucleus colonies, you have queens already in your apiary in March and April and May. They're already there. 2 years ago at the EAS meeting, they had a silent auction, and there were a number of books that didn't get picked up and paid for. And I happened to snag one of these books, and it was called For the Love of Bees by Leslie Bill, an English author. and she traveled to Africa with Brother Adam and in search of the Monticola bee. And she happened to mention in there the history of Buckfast Abbey, and that Brother Adam was a stone finisher working for Brother Columban. And in 1900, Brother Columban made a nuke box that held 4 nucleus colonies, and he would use the excess, wintering these nucleus colonies, he would use the excess brood for boosting production colonies, which is exactly what we were doing. We discovered this on our own. Then all of a sudden, here's Brother Columban in 1900 wintering nucleus colonies. Oh my goodness, what happened? We got spoiled by the packaged bee industry in the States, and nucleus colonies were never used. Nucleus colonies were, don't buy nucleus colonies because you might get disease. So you buy packaged bees. Well, packaged bees are failing. So that really opened my eyes. And I tried to think, well, when did it start? How early can I track this back? So I started investing in bee books. I spent over $1,000 on bee books, and I get all these cool books like Beekeeping in Britain and Honey Farming by Manley, and Snellgrove's book, and C.C. Miller's book, and Ron Brown's book, 1,000 Years of Devon Beekeeping. And I find out that all of these folks, long time ago, wintered nucleus colonies. For instance, well, Snellgrove in 1946 wrote about it. 4 combs of bees and a couple of frames of brood, feed them, and they winter. Amazing, 1946. Or how about Manley? Same thing, 1948. He's wintering nucleus colonies. Or how about Miller in 1911, talking about wintering 2 nucleus colonies in one box. They form one cluster of bees, as if a division board was shoved down between a single cluster, which is what we discovered by accident, opening these nucleus colonies in the spring, in the cold times. There aren't 2 individual clusters in that double nuke box. There's one cluster, separated by a divider. Incredible, 1911. And he has reference to this in 1891. This one really blew me away. Here's one of your Devon beekeepers in 1862, a skepist. He has a skep with a top, a removable top, and he supers this with eeks, probably from the bottom, and he takes the top eek off as the honey crop, but the one down below it is so strong with bees and brood, he takes that off, puts it on another bottom board, puts a cover on it, they raise a queen. What is that? Is that not making a nucleus colony after the main honey flow, which is what we're talking about, in 1862? So this has been going on forever. So let me ask, what do you see here? A frame of brood? Yes. A honey flow is on? Yes, you can see the white wax and they're filling it up. Is it a great pattern? No, not really. There's something wrong with this pattern. It could be anything. It could be the queen. It could be chalk brood. Hygienic colony cleaning out chalk brood. I see the potential of my apiary. This frame of brood is the most valuable thing I have in my apiary in reserve. This is potential energy, not kinetic. This is potential energy. This is the future. Let me ask, this is an apiary that's making a fine honey flow. There's 200 pounds of honey on these colonies. But there's always one, isn't there? There's always one that just doesn't do it. What do we do with this colony? Well, we requeen it, of course, don't we? We requeen this colony. Why do we requeen this colony? So that we hopefully have a better colony next year. Does requeening this colony ensure that we have a better colony next year? No, not really. What does requeening this colony get me? Requeening this colony gets me one colony. Okay? Suppose I was to split that colony that needed to be requeened into nucleus colonies. I can almost always get 4 nucleus colonies out of that one non-productive colony. Isn't that better odds? Isn't that better odds having 4 laying queens coming through the winter than 1? I think it is. So suppose you have 10 production colonies in your backyard apiary, and you have 10 nucleus colonies. These are double nuke boxes. 10 nucleus colonies. And you have a severe loss. You lose 50% of all your bees. Half your production colonies and half your nucleus colonies. What have you got left? Don't you still have 10 colonies of bees? Of course you do, because you put the nucleus colonies in the dead production colonies, and now you have 10 colonies again. Did you go to Greece or Italy to buy packaged bees? No. Did you pay 195 pounds for a nucleus colony? No. The nucleus colonies were already wintering in your apiary. They're right there to be used. So how do we start these nucleus colonies? This is a shot of a number of different kinds of boxes, different kinds of setups. It's not about what kind of box you use. It's about what's inside the box. So you can have wooden boxes or silly little styrofoam boxes. You can have division board feeders that separate the 2 nucleus colonies, or you can have a solid divider. You can use little wooden inner covers, or you can use grain bags. It doesn't matter what kind of equipment you use. You use what you have. You use the equipment that you have access to. You use the equipment that you have on hand. The important thing is to get out and do it and set these colonies up and let them do it. Let them build a colony. In the springtime, you have something like this. Again, just after snow melt. These bees are still wrapped for winter. They still have their winter wrappings on. And these little colonies are just incredible. They're just packed with bees. So how do I use that brood to set up nucleus colonies to support my apiary? Now, certainly we can take brood from strong colonies. I mean, a colony like these can certainly yield a little bit of resource to make a nucleus colony. But that's not the point. You need to use your resources wisely. Is using up the resource in a production colony that will possibly go on to make 100 pounds or more of honey a wise use of your resource? Possibly not. I would rather sacrifice those non-productive colonies and let the production colonies go on to make as much honey as they can. So you take an apiary like this one that's making a little bit of honey. I would say there's some of those hives have 250 pounds of honey on them. But there's always one colony or a number of colonies in your apiary that's not up to par. Now, when I say non-productive, I don't mean weak. I don't mean sick. I mean non-productive. The brood is healthy. The bees are healthy. It's either the queen or something. They swarmed, and now they're rebuilding, but they're still not going to make honey for you this year. So you use the resources in those non-productive colonies. You obviously would never use a foul brood colony, or you wouldn't use a chalk brood colony like this one. This one has got so much chalk brood colony that it smells. So sometimes we get chalk brood like this. You wouldn't use a colony like this. There's not enough healthy brood there to set up a viable colony. You don't want to use parasitic mite syndrome bees. Look at these poor sick bees. Putting poor sick little bees into a nuke box doesn't mean it's going to make a healthy box. They're still sick bees. If you made splits in the spring, you could certainly use those splits later in the summer to make nucleus colonies. It doesn't matter. You're just using brood and bees to the best advantage. So this is how you do it. You identify the colony that you would like to split up. You separate, you remove any supers, honey supers that might be on the hive. You put your nuke boxes, you surround the colony with your empty nuke boxes, and you start pulling frames of brood. So you open up the colony, and you get it down to maybe to 2 brood boxes, and you pull the first box out of the first comb out of the top box against the sidewall, and it would be maybe a comb of honey. And so you put that comb of honey in the brood box, in the nuke box, against the divider. And you pull another frame out, and it's another frame of honey. And you put that against the divider on the other side, because each nuke needs a frame of feed. Then you pull another comb out, and it's a nice comb of brood. So you put that one next to the comb of honey, and so on. You pull out another nice frame of brood, you put it next to the other comb of honey. You pull out a partial frame, and you put it next to the good comb. In the bottom box, there will usually be empty combs. You pull an empty comb, and you put it in slot number 4. So basically what you're doing is you're setting up a nucleus colony with a frame of feed, 2 frames with brood, a good one and a partial, or 2 good ones, and an empty comb, and the bees that are on those. So I recommend that you leave your smoker alone, and don't smoke the bees when you're pulling brood, because smoke drives the bees off the combs, and you want the bees to remain on the combs doing their job. So you pull the combs of brood, leaving the bees on the combs. That's really all the bees they need. They don't need to be overstocked with bees. This is not a spring split. You make a spring split, you need to shake extra bees into the box, because you need to ensure that the brood is not going to get chilled, because you have cold nights. But in midsummer, you don't have cold nights. So you don't need a box full of bees. You just need enough bees on the brood to keep it warm and to take care of it until it emerges. Because once that frame and a half or 2 frames of brood emerges, you've got a box full of bees. And so you work yourself across the brood box and down into the second brood box, making as many nucleus colonies as possible. I move mine to a new location. I have so many apiaries that I can make nucleus colonies in apiary number 1, take them to apiary number 2, put them on the ground, give them a queen, make nucleus colonies in apiary number 2, take it to apiary number 3, put them on the ground, give them a queen or a queen cell, and let them go. 10 days later, I go back, I'll pull the queen cage and check to see that the queen is laying. And that's the setup. That's the basic setup. You're not using a lot of resources. Just using enough resources to get that queen laying. She has the whole rest of the summer to build up. You just want to get the queen laying. So how do you manage these nucleus colonies? Well, the biggest issue that you're going to have is swarming and absconding. To prevent them from swarming, if they're in a single box, you can always remove a frame of brood and bees and put it in a nuke box. And if you had 2 nukes, and each gave you a frame of brood and bees, you now have another nucleus colony. If you had an apiary full of nucleus colonies, as I do, I can take a frame of brood out of each one of those, make a whole lot of nucleus colonies, move them to another yard, and have another yard of nucleus colonies, giving them back comb, giving the parent back comb, so the queen has a place to lay. You could put a queen excluder on top of a double nuke box. As long as the queens can't crawl underneath the excluder and get to the other nuke, these bees work fine. You put a super on the excluder, they work together. They don't fight. They don't go kill the other queen. They're happy together. There's 2 laying queens in there. They have no issue with laying queens. They fill the supers with honey. Of course, when you take the honey off, you put a triangular escape board on top of the excluder, put the supers on. The bees go down into whichever nuke box they want. They don't fight. But now you've got nucleus colonies without 1 drop of honey because they put all the honey in the supers. So that's sort of an issue. That's not a good thing to do, because now you have to feed lots and lots of sugar syrup. You could expand the colony. If you had nuke boxes with movable division board feeders as the divider, you could get another nuke box, put the second nuke in the other nuke box right next to the first one so that the entrances line up. Move the feeder to one side and have 8 combs for each nucleus colony. But this takes twice as much equipment. It takes 2 bottoms and 2 boxes and 2 feeders and 2 covers and two inner covers, crown boards of some kind. Twice as much equipment. Well, there is a better way. Think up. Bees think up. Bees are vertical. Bees are vertical animals. Bees are not horizontal animals. Will bees move horizontally? Of course they will. But what is the natural cavity of the European honeybee? A tree. Trees don't grow vertically. Trees grow horizontally. I mean, trees don't grow horizontally. Trees grow vertically. Work with your bees. Give them what they want. Let them move up and give them a super. So you make little 4-frame half-width supers, and you put one on top of each nucleus colony. So here's a dedicated nuke yard. This yard probably has 100 nucleus colonies in it, all built up into 2 stories. So when do I add this story? The day I pull the queen cage and check to see if there's a laying queen. I'll pull the queen cage. I'll check for a laying queen. I'll see the queen is laying. I'll move the comb that was the feed comb. The feed comb is against the divider. Now this feed comb is not a big, fat comb of capped honey. I prefer to use a predominantly uncapped frame of honey, frame of feed. As soon as they get going, they remove the frame, they remove the nectar or honey from that comb. Remember, I said that the divider is the center of the cluster. The center of the brood nest is the divider, not the center of the cavity. They don't like, just as big colonies, just as in production colonies, bees don't like nectar in the center of their brood nest. They have brood in the center of their brood nest. So they remove the nectar from that comb and fill it up with brood. So in 2 weeks, that comb is full of brood. You elevate that comb, you remove that comb, replace it with a frame of foundation, elevate it into a second box against what will be the divider, where the 2 supers come together is the divider, is the center of the brood nest. Put 3 more foundations in that colony and close it up. They'll draw that foundation out so fast. They love to draw foundation, and they make perfect worker comb. Nucleus colonies make worker comb. They don't make drone comb. The first year, they'll make no drone comb. You could put a comb in a nucleus colony with a big hole in the middle of it. A production colony would do what? They would fill it with drone. A nucleus colony will fill it with worker comb. In fact, isn't one of our biggest drawbacks at this point not having enough comb? Well, these colonies on a flow will draw this foundation out so fast that we have to remove the drawn, partially filled combs and replace them with more foundation. And sometimes you have to do it a 3rd time. All of these nucleus colonies will draw a minimum of 4 frames of foundation. Many of them will draw 6, 8. Remove the extras, put them in storage, put more foundation in, make more combs. Now that foundation that we're putting in the bottom box, we've always been told, you need to put foundation above the cluster for them to draw it out. You ought to see how fast they draw out that comb. That's against the divider in the bottom box. It's amazing. It's just puff right out, full of brood, amazingly, instantly full of brood in a brand new comb. So as you're going, you look at, you can see over on the right side, on the far right side, you can see the dark brood comb. And the next 3 were the foundations. See where the brood is. So you tip, in order to inspect this colony, to see how they're doing, you don't have to pull combs out of it. You just have to tip up the top box and look at the bottom. And you come along and you see something like this. Whoops. There may be an egg in that cup. If there's an egg in that cup, it's time to remove some frames and add more frames to it. If it's frames of honey, put them in storage or extract them. If it's frames of brood and there's no more room, take out a frame of brood, give it to somebody in the apiary, put more foundation in. If they're really ahead of you, if you're behind, add comb. Add comb against the divider, because the divider is the center of the brood nest, and that's where the queen wants to lay. So you can stay ahead of them by removing drawn comb and replacing it with comb. The additional benefits of wintering these nucleus colonies is queen evaluation. If you're going to requeen a colony, you may have 20, 30, or more combs in that colony, and all that equipment, and you're devoting all that equipment to one queen, and you evaluate that queen, and what happens if she's a dud? You've just wasted all that equipment on a dud. Well, nucleus colonies perform exactly the same way as big production colonies, only in miniature. So you can evaluate these queens with very little resources. You can have spring queens. You can make what I call bee bombs, which is nothing more than what Brother Columban did. You remove that extra brood, you give it to colonies that need a boost, and they explode as if a bomb was dropped on them. So the nucleus colonies are supporting the production colonies. What is supporting the nucleus colonies? The brood factories. These are brood factories. These are overwintered nucleus colonies that I periodically remove brood from by building them up into 3 stories, removing an amount of brood, enough so the colony won't swarm, but not enough so it's diminished, so it's weakened, harvest it, and make another yard of nucleus colonies with nothing but my own resources. So the big question, where do you get those? There's the lovely queen. Nice hairy legs. A lovely cleft on her thorax. Big fat abdomen. Gosh, she's gorgeous. I'm in love. Well, raising queens is all about the jelly. Maximizing jelly production. Well, with all the brood you need, with all this expendable brood, you can make cell builders that are ridiculously strong. This is a cell builder. Do you think we have any nurse bees in this? Of course. Maximizing the nurse bee population in the cell builder is how we maximize jelly production. But where do you get that? Where do you get the brood? You get it from overwintered nucleus colonies and not from production colonies. Brood donors use up the resources of your production colonies. So you go to your nucleus colonies. And that's what makes it sustainable, is brood factories. This is a cell builder set up in the fashion of Brother Adam by adding brood to a strong colony and not using up the resources. Set it up for a graft, feed it, and you make these monster colonies. This is the graft. And these are the cells you get from this. There's so many nurse bees in these colonies that they make these beautiful cells and these lovely pupa, and they're still full of jelly on the day you harvest the cells. There was so much jelly in these cells they couldn't even use it all. This is the mating yard. I have over 500 mating nukes in this yard. This is the mating yard with their feeder shells on. They're being fed. I can restock my cell builders when I pull that round of cells out. That same day, I can go to my brood factory yard, pull more brood out, give them another box, build them up again. This is a cell building yard. Imagine harvesting 4,400 pounds of honey from your cell building yard after growing 1,500 queens from it. It's totally sustainable. So in 2011, rather than using up all my nucleus colonies as future colonies or selling them, I kept 50 over. And from May 9th to June 19th, using 7 frames of brood in each cell builder, I stocked 35 cell builders over that time, totaling 245 frames of brood. Then I switched to making nucleus colonies from that brood. And I made 330 nucleus colonies, meaning that I harvested over 900 combs of brood from 50 nucleus colonies to be used in my apiary. I didn't buy any bees. My bees provided the bees. And so I set up dedicated nucleus yards. Does this make your apiary sustainable? Yes. You didn't have to buy packages from Greece or pay a fortune for nucleus colonies. You know, you have to winter them. Here we go. Here's another 3-story colony buried in snow after a huge storm we had. The bees winter okay. I like to see this. This insulates the bees from our frigid temperatures. You have to feed them. They have to have enough feed for winter. You don't feed them as much as they'll take, and because they're, you know, honeybee colonies are like teenage boys. You know, having a nucleus yard is like having an auditorium full of teenage boys and putting out a buffet. And they'll eat every bit of it. Doesn't matter how much you put out, they'll eat every bit of it. Well, if you fill every comb every cell in the colony with feed, the bees have no clustering space. They can't regulate the temperature in their core of their brood nest, and it's not good for them. You only need what they need. I find I'm giving my colonies about 1 to 2 gallons of sugar syrup. They provide most of the other feed. So the top box is pretty well filled, and the bottom box has a little honey in it. I insulate the inner covers, the crown board, if you will, with a styrofoam. I put black paper around them for solar gain, not for insulation. And this is an apiary. This is a dedicated apiary, ready for winter. Something like this. This is a production colony with nucleus colonies wintering on top, which is another reason I went to the 2-story nucleus colony setup, because I don't have to move them to the top of a colony for extra winter heat. They do just fine right where they are. And there's nothing more I hate than moving beehives. I hate moving beehives. After moving 600 beehives into the orchard and out by hand for 20 years, this is what your apiary, this is what the potential energy in the brood in your apiary does for you. It gives you all the bees you need. These bees will build up in the spring faster than anything you have. They're incredible. So what's the point of all this? You know, the sustainable apiary gives you strong bees. It gives you better honey crops because you have young queens and lots of bees. You have all the brood you need to stock up any colony that's not up to par. Now, I don't know if you remember the old days. I can't say that you would remember the old days before acarine, because acarine came here so early in the last century. To us, it never came till 1989. And I can ask an audience, how many people remember keeping bees before acarine? 2 or 3 people will raise their hands. But it's true. Having all the bees in your apiary, I mean, aren't you just trying to have fun? Well, this is so much fun, I just can't tell you how much fun it is to raise your own bees and to raise your own queens and to see the results from your hard work and the bees' hard work. It's incredible. And it's so much better than plunking down your credit card and sending your money off to Greece. Are you kidding me? So that's what it is. The sustainable apiary makes beekeeping fun again. You don't have to go the other way. You know, you don't have, if you've seen ducks cross a road, they're always got their snoot up the other one's butt. And they're following along, and they're all going blindly in the same direction. Well, turn around and look in the other direction like that other smart duck, because he knows there's got to be a better way. So, thank you.
At the very start of your fantastic talk, brilliant actually, blew my mind away, the very significant issue of lack of forage, you addressed that immediately with changing highly mechanised farming techniques, loss of... do you have a plan for that?
I have no plan for that.
No.
I could move my bees, but they're following me. So now they've taken over all the good farmland in the Champlain Valley where I keep bees, and they're moving out of the good farmland into the marginal farmland, and they're buying up those. So as the family farm fails, they're taking over everywhere, and they're taking out all the hedgerows, even in the marginal farmland now, and planting corn. Well, the price of corn went from last year at $8.50 a bushel. This year it's $4.50 a bushel. And I'm hoping that that's going to have an effect, that that's going to change this. Our government offered a subsidy for corn growers for ethanol, and they're putting ethanol in our engines, which is ruining our engines, and it's ruining our farmland, and it's ruining our rivers. And they've just ended the subsidy, and the price of corn dropped in half. I'm hoping, because I can't move. I'm not moving. I'm going to stay where I am. They're not going to chase me out of my territory anymore.
If you join me, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.